Channelers are a huge problem. In the Wheel of Time, the general populace has such a aversion to people who use the one power. And the Eye of the World really goes through and tries to paint the picture of how many people really don't like channeling. One example, of course, we talk about Emmons Field, but just to get away from Emmons Field because we like talking about it so much, is Captain Domon.
Mm-hmm.
They're pulling up into White Bridge. You know, it's this incredible bridge, right? It's this bridge that looks like glass, but it's not glass, and it looks like it's, it's so thin, there's no way it could hold itself up.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how wet it gets, even though it looks very slick and smooth like glass, it's not slippery or anything like that. Tom says it must be left over from the Age of Legends. Then Robert Jordan goes into, if it was from the Age of Legends, therefore the bridge was built by Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm.
It's Aes Sedai work. And Captain Domon is like, nah, it doesn't have to be that old. It doesn't have to be Aes Sedai work. And he kind of walks off, kind of like pissed and grossed out that, this was brought up. The Aes Sedai and the channeling were brought up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is understandable, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, if you had a good society, or you assume to have had a good society, and you talked about the Age of Legends, right? And you could attribute that to one group of people being completely destroyed, and people starving and dying and go to war and everything like that. And it makes sense to have generational disdain.
oh yeah, like it's very interesting just to see like magic was something that was not approved of.
Yeah.
And then like outlawed in whole sections.
Yeah.
Right, whole countries. Channeling is outlawed.
Yeah. I think one more, I'd say, abrasive example of how much channeling was feared was when Moraine was telling Nynaeve that she was an unknowing channeler. And, and Nynaeve literally says, like, something about Aes Sedai dark friend. Like, just, I'm not an Aes Sedai dark friend, or something like that.
Yeah, they're outside of Shatter Logoth.
Yeah.
The next morning, and she stocks up on him, and she's very blunt to Moraine now that it's the two of them alone, and yeah, I think you're right. She said something like, "I'm no dark friend."
Yeah.
Like, I can't channel.
It's like something that it's like someone just told you that you're super disgusting and like you're a pariah. Like, get away from me.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm not that. Ew.
If you were to bring that into like today, right? How shocking that would be, and really how scary would that be that someone could just basically do anything that they wanted.
Yeah, like at all.
And you're completely powerless to stop them outside of a sudden violent ambush attack is the only chance that anyone would have, and you get one shot at it.
Yeah.
And they don't need any special equipment. Like, they can trick people into doing anything they like them to do, right?
Yeah.
If a merchant, right? Like, you get into a bad deal, you're going to assume that they used their power on you and robbed you, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, or the woman could steal the husband away, it wasn't because of anything you did or anything about them other than they used magic.
Yeah. And if you think about it that way, like especially with the intro to people starting to channel, right? Like everything from your dad started giving you everything you wanted, right? Or like, what if suddenly your like husband was into a girl, right? And then you found out she could channel.
Yeah.
Or it's kind of terrifying from that
Yeah,
aspect.
and it doesn't
right?
really matter whether or not
It's real.
the person, actually could channel.
Yeah.
Just saying that they could channel would completely change everyone's perspective about that person, because human nature, I guess, is we're going to assume the worst when things are going very poorly or against us.
Yeah.
And as the person with these abilities, right, you could see how it would be very tempting, almost too much so, to use your abilities to your own benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. What's really fun about this exact thread of talk is if you put it in the context of like the Salem witch trials, it fits right in. And it's just fun.
Yeah. Well, magic in general, right?
Yeah, of course.
Which is a really interesting thought exercise, because we have like religious figures across the world, across cultures, across all religions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of books out there kind of on the topic of where these religious figures are essentially performing magic to help other people towards their ends, right?
Yeah.
This is something very common. Just for example, in Japanese culture, you'd go to a shrine, you would write a prayer on like a little, like, I'm not sure what the right word for it would be, like a little token, and you would hang it up in the shrine, and the priests are supposed to come and like read those and like use their power of prayer to help that wish of yours come true. I'm very being very broad about that. If anyone listening is curious about the details of that, I would encourage them to go and read up on it, because what I just said there is not 100% accurate. I'm just being very general on this topic of magic, right? Christian religions have these blessings, right? Like the baptisms and etc., right? And these are all like within these academic circles analyzed within like the space of magic. And it's very easy to see how that same thing that those priests are doing, they're using their magical abilities for the benefit of others. If you turn that and make it now a benefit for yourself, it's something that becomes very, very scary. And I would even say it's extremely scary within the realm of a priest, if that priest was able to cast a prayer for his group over another group, famously Christians over Muslims, right? Or we could go on with that.
Yep.
That's extremely scary if they were able to use this magic and no one could stop them from bringing advantage to themselves over others.
Yeah, and in the realm of reality with cults, even just the thought of these magics being real has power.
Oh yeah. getting into this whole thing of magic.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Cults. I don't know if we could really define the cult versus not cult here, but my personal belief on magic, right, is if we're talking about like, what is magic, like define magic in reality, like you brought up. I don't know, what is your, if we were to say magic within reality, like not outside of Wheel of Time, but like in our daily lives, like how would you define magic in our world?
Oh, that's an interesting question, right? Because I don't have a really good answer for you. Because obviously I could go into the scientific aspect, right? Where we're like, you have a cell phone that has access to all information known to man. Like that's magic, right? The majority of people don't understand that, how that works.
Yeah,
right?
I would say like for me, if you define magic in like Dungeons and Dragons,
yeah,
kind of magic, right? Like you stand there, you like throw some salt into the air, you say some words and you wave your hands and a fireball like shoots forth from your hands and hits your enemies and blows up, right? I think in my opinion like that magic is not real yet, but it will be at some point. Because that's that definition that's so famous, right? Any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic. And that's that like Dungeons and Dragons style magic, to me, that conceivably become reality.
Sure. I mean, you could already say it has been, right?
In some, absolutely. But if you were defining magic as like one of the most famous like popular magical types across all cultures in history is that voodoo doll kind of concept, right?
Yeah.
That's where I have like a doll and I poke it in the foot and you go ow. That kind of like thought of like I draw some symbols on a piece of paper and I say some words and suddenly you start like tripping over your feet and like that kind of idea. That one is kind of like I use my thoughts and feelings to influence the universe around me. That by influencing the external universe around me, that I don't think would come in. I do believe it would influence the person doing the activity, their own internal.
I actually have a perfect example of someone who can say things and write things down and then influence the world, right? Think about programmers making bots throughout the internet, right? They're really influencing people. It's
true,
proven.
But they're not doing it via just their words and their like feelings and thoughts, right? That's something.
Fair. But they're writing things down, if you will, and having the effect take place across thousands, millions of people, hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah, but not via only their thoughts and emotions and, in their own private world. I think that's the key there is if like the Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're influencing people's thoughts and behavior and personal choices via how they're engineering their app.
Yeah.
But that is using external tools. They're using the external in order to influence other people, which is different than what
psychic abilities.
that priest is doing, right? Where the priest, whether it's
Is it?
Buddhist, Christian, Judaism, like whatever, right?
Mhm.
Whatever religion, where they're praying to the universe to make things happen, right?
Yeah.
Which is something that was not just like religious practice, like historically, right? But it was also considered a very highly practical thing to do in order to make your crops grow well.
Mhm.
You needed to have your maybe not a priest precisely, but you had to do the religious rites, the magical rites.
Yeah. I mean, if we call scamming people magic,
Well,
then we'll have a much bigger conversation on what magic is.
Wait, no, I'm talking about like there's the whole historical thing that was
Yeah.
going on in England with, where the king stepped in and all that stuff. I'm talking about like ancient Greece, where
Sure.
like
I mean, like,
Egypt, etc. Right?
yeah,
It was a
it's
very
across the world.
practical. Yeah, like
Only good things happen because you worship me or what I represent.
I think it's far more complex
Sure.
than that, and
Of course.
but like it was a casting magic, as it were, was a highly practical thing that you had to do.
Yeah.
If you wanted bread
Sure.
for the winter, you performed these magical activities.
Yeah.
If you didn't, you did not have bread.
Sure.
So that kind of idea is where my like line for magic kind of draws. But if you're using external tools to influence directly other things within the universe, that kind of magic, I would define that as
And you're moving,
real magic.
Ironically, I think you're moving from naturism to totemism, right? Like, because there's the different levels of religion, right? Naturism maybe it's all in you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have innate power. Totemism is magical objects, right?
Right.
Like this item has inherent power. And then you move into deism, which is there's otherworldly beings out there that have power and give you power. And then it moves into monotheism, where there's just one single God, the evolution of religion, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I think, I guess I sit on the humanism, like humans have power and humans imbue totems with power, which brings it all back to Wheel of Time, because that is essentially, what's going on in the Wheel of Time, right?
Of course.
Individual people, special people, not everybody, special people have internal power, external, that comes from an external source, but they're the ones able to use it via their internal personal power, and they imbue objects with it. They can also directly influence the world without the objects, but
to the Age of Legends, right? The Sa'angreal got to such a degree that even people like Lewis Theron were like, "Don't use that; it's too dangerous."
And they were also using stuff or like building things which all the Muggles could use.
Podcast just swapped.
We're stepping into Harry Potter.
Anyways,
one day.
So I think it's fun that in the story of Wheel of Time, the degree in which a person individually becomes dangerous skyrockets as their degree of knowledge goes up, right? Their technology, i.e. being able to make ter'angreal and angreal and sa'angreal, right?
Mhm.
And so it's this escalation of one individual being terrifying, potentially. And when someone can live to be 1,000 years old and they
Mm.
have everything from their views are still, the societal views are still from 1,000 years ago.
Oh yeah, yeah. We were chatting about this. Yeah, that's wild, right?
Right.
Like imagine someone from 1,000 years ago who has like special powers and consolidated a a position of societal weight
Yeah.
behind them,
Like it,
meaning they can influence others via like political behavior, like just they
terrifying.
have friends,
Yeah.
right? And
And
they have wealth and
all of their friends are in power too. Like
yeah,
think of how terrifying it is with just like 70-year-olds in charge.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Oh man, 1,000 years ago. So right now it's 2024 as of recording this. So 1,000 years ago,
Yeah.
it was 1024. That's like
That's so much crazy time periods, right? Because what the Vikings were
yeah, that's Viking era
killing, yeah, in
in Northern
Europe.
Europe.
Yeah. When were the Mongols taking over uh, Asia? Because that's pretty, like the
I think
Mongolians
it was
were,
after that. I think it was
yeah,
after
I
that,
think,
but
well,
I'm gonna
Roman,
pull it up.
yeah.
I gotta.
Now I'm curious. Okay, so uh, with regardless of how crazy the world was 1,000 years ago,
Okay, yeah. So 13th and 14th centuries
were the
was the
Mongolians? Oh my
was the
gosh.
Mongol Empire. Yeah. So 1,000 years.
Before that,
Um. Yeah. 1,000 years ago is so long. Someone was like influencing society for 1,000 years. Like the views that they would have would be wild, right? Like,
yeah, just absolutely insane. And then I want to take it a step further. Okay. They've been in battles for the last 1,000 years. Okay. They've been to wars every 20 years or something like
they
that.
would still think that like torturing people was a valid form of punishment. They would be like, yeah, well, he stole an apple, right? Like,
Why wouldn't I take his hand?
yeah, burn his foot until it's not there anymore.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
like that's
Holy cow. Yeah. Like and if they were in wars, right, consistently, genocide is
yeah, Jen.
commonplace throughout history. Like
Oh
every
yeah,
like what, 20 years or something like that.
yeah, like Alexander the Great just like decimated entire cities because he was like, "Hey, surrender," and they're like, "No," and he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna kill everything in and around your city, everything,"
Yeah.
and he did. Um,
Yeah. Genocide was a very it was like the number one tool, if you will.
yeah, I mean, granted, back then that was a lot fewer people
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
to carry out a genocide, but yeah, like someone 1,000 years old hanging out with those experiences and views on how to deal with a problem
Yep. Yeah.
would still be like sitting and they were like healthy, right? Like
Mhm.
these Aes Sedai were 100% healthy, and then suddenly they just be like gone.
And
So they would be
yeah.
like sitting essentially like in the White House, right?
Yep.
Perfectly healthy, conducting all the decisions that were being made.
Constantly accruing power, making bigger and bigger terrifying weapons.
Yeah, so basically humanity would not move forward societally
At all.
ever.
Yeah. Terrifying. And from a generational perspective, the people in power are teaching the people that will come after them exactly how to do things.
solve problems. Yeah.
Yeah, terrifying. And I just want to bring into it the mental problems that these people would eventually generate for themselves.
For themselves, aside from everybody else.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, uh, yeah. Like the PTSD
Yeah.
of someone who had been in like the last battle, right?
Yeah.
And they obviously everyone who survived the last battle is going to have insane amounts of PTSD, and I would even say the Tuathawan, they are going to have just insane levels of PTSD, even though they didn't partake in the violence directly themselves.
Oh, yeah.
They were still going around cleaning up bodies.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
Of the people I know who had similar jobs, they had some of the worst PTSD that there of anyone that I've interacted with. I mean, you can imagine why.
Yeah.
So there's not a single person who would have escaped the last battle without very severe PTSD. And now these people who are going to be waking up in the middle of the night with night terrors,
Yeah.
can now accidentally kill like their whole neighborhood, essentially.
Yeah.
And not even know they're doing it, which is, of course, the opening scene.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I like full circle or wheel. See what I did there? And I think what's fun about this is it leads us to our next discussion point of how do you humanely in a society handle these individuals with insane amounts of power? Emphasis on the insane.
Right. Like you can't let them channel. Like you just can't.
Or you create nature preserves, right? You separate them out.
Yeah. If you could.
If you could, right? And this kind of comes back to the Shanjan, right? Because obviously keeping slaves is not humane. That is not a solution.
Yeah, controlling the channelers via isolation and torture.
Yeah.
Like you can't be doing that. I mean, obviously, if the people running the world are 1,000 years old, they're like, yeah, that is the humane way.
Yeah, makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah, but from where we sit, in our views on was acceptable treatment of other people, no, like that's why Robert Jordan wrote that the way he did. It was because it's very much not acceptable to us.
Yeah.
We read that and we're horrified.
Which is, he gets great enjoyment from.
Yeah, well, it's important to have a little bit of horror in your books. But yeah, like it's, how do you stop them when they can't stop themselves? And they're just going to cause far too much danger and problems to everyone else.
Right. And that takes us to formatting.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you can't control who does and does not become a channeler, then the next best thing is no one becomes a channeler.
Yeah, no one can do it. And it's when I was reading the books, it seemed like such a strange thing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But as we were having this discussion, it actually makes a lot of sense. It seems like actually the best way to do it.
Yeah, the most humane. And I think the more you delve into formatting, the more it kind of clicks and goes, oh, okay. So make it so people don't have to ever experience channeling, but then be aware that there's an outside threat of channeling you have to worry about. Be able to pinpoint that, right? Because like they had the stones that as soon as channeling started happening by the city, the giants or the statues or whatever it was, it's been a while, gives you the direction at which point the channeling is occurring. And
Right.
maybe you can fill in my knowledge gaps on this. Was it that the women were merchants more often than not for formatting? I know that women had far more power than the men, but
you mean the cultural aspects of formatting?
yeah, because it's fun because if the merchants were women, right, and they left the protective circle of essentially the synthetic steading, right? If they accidentally started to channel, it wasn't as big of a deal.
Yeah, I don't know. When I get back around to that, I'll have to pay attention.
Agreed. Just a funny thought from like, oh, if you have to force people outside of your bubble of the power protection, might as well do it for the ones that aren't going to go mad.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And going into like the Shanshan, we could see how obviously the world is much larger than this very small peninsula in which the story takes place.
Yeah.
But the Shanshan and like the stories about all the other nations, they tightly control their channelers very, very much so.
Yeah.
And it seems rather unique only in this area, as far as we know, that are channelers allowed to run free.
Yeah.
And do what they like. But you could see how the Shanshan might be attracted to a solution like formatting instead of the collars.
Especially if there were no longer threats for the state to face.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously going to be very valuable just in their ability to make things, right? In construction, all of those kinds of things. But, you could have a political shift where it's no longer okay.
Yeah. Especially with advances with such as dragons, right? As soon as you can build dragons, the warfare aspect of having changed Domane drops a ton.
Oh yeah, because dragons scales.
Yeah.
You can deliver dragons to every single battlefield, and you can deliver as many as you can make and as many as you can carry.
And
where Domane were extremely rare resource, especially one that could be usable within battle.
Yeah. Add to it that they have their own resource of Ogier. And if you're dealing with the construction portion, are you gonna use Domane or Ogier?
Well, I mean, you'd probably want to use them together, but
of course, but you wouldn't have to.
As technological advances come through.
Yeah, and the Ogier or your stonemasons multiply, right? Grow.
The everything else scales.
Yep.
Beyond what it currently is, and Domane cannot.
Exactly.
And just to kind of like, for time's sake, because we're talking forever again, if you could scale formatting's little bubble, from just covering their tiny little spot to cover a whole country, then if a political group, were able to scale it farther and get the resources, they could potentially in the future cover the entire planet with such a bubble.
Sure. And in the interim, even if you could only make, X number more of formatting, you could do the testing early at a young age and then just force them all in those bubbles, right? That'd be a fun kind of dystopian story of people stuck in cities, not allowed to leave.
Yeah. Well, again, that scales, right?
Yeah.
If you could build this around a city, you scale it up so it builds a reasonable amount of area, like a country, right? Like a state.
Yeah.
And then you can build those around, right?
Yeah.
You can build them again and again and again. And if one can cover a large enough area, you could cover the vast majority of the planet without having to cover the entire planet. So, and that is definitely one path that I feel like the Shanshan would be interested in taking, in eliminating, and pretty much everyone in general, of eliminating the channelers' ability to channel without resorting to torture and like slavery in order to stop them.
Yeah, essentially dehumanizing people in order to control your problem of really dangerous people, potentially.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's a fun conversation for sure. Especially when thought of, what if it was a limited resource? Well, then people become isolated and shipped into like that area, right? For at least for the resource scarcity, right? If you're trying to just be resource efficient, you could just move people to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's enough steadings that they could essentially build, even just turn steadings into those areas.
Yeah. And which, of course, again, doesn't scale well because those aren't very big.
No, that's actually a super fun point, because then you take it to the next level and you're accidentally creating super breeders.
So that everyone channels there.
That's a fun little storyline if you pull on that string.
If someone was very short-sighted, then one person just steps out of bounds with 1 foot, and suddenly that's it, game over.
Yeah, and then back to genocide.
Yeah, but if they cover, large swaths of area, then they can never leave. And if they are able to extend this anti-channeling field to cover the entire planet,
yeah,
no worries.
I would say one funny little tidbit to
until we start living in space.
Yeah,
and then maybe that's why everyone goes crazy in space.
Yeah. To end that weird string, I do want to say, how often have you known a government to be farsighted?
Yeah.
Versus just implementing the short-term solution. Because it's easy.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I like the discovery that the reason why people always go crazy in space in movies is because maybe they start to channel.
Oh, that's pretty fun. That's a fun thought.
Yep,
right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, on that, I think we're going to call this episode finished.